Imagine buying your kid a toy only to find the batteries aren't included, or buying furniture but it's missing the tools to build it. Frustrating, right? Now imagine that exact same feeling, but you're paying way more. That is what buying business software usually feels like: fragmented, disconnected, and incredibly expensive. Odoo completely changes that. Odoo is a complete, fully integrated business suite where all your apps actually talk to each other. We're talking automated lead routing for your sales team, seamless AI integration, and an intuitive point-and-click website builder. It's everything your business needs to scale, saving you time, headaches, and money. Stop piecing your software together. Go to odoo.com. That's ODOO.com to learn more.
Here's the loophole that President Trump used. There is no oversight over demolition. So he was able to bring a bulldozer, I think it was a backhoe actually, to the East Wing and knock it down pretty much at a whim. There was nothing to stop him from doing that. It is a separate question about what he will be permitted to put up there. But, now that the thing has been demolished, it's highly unlikely that they'll just plant a flower garden there.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Bob Crawford here. Thrilled to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline, the show where you ask the questions. And the best way to get us the question is to send it to AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. That's AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. Or you can ask it right on the Spotify app. Okay, today's question is about the demolition of the East Wing of the White House. Here to help me answer this question today is Robert Clara. He's author of the book, The Hidden White House, Harry Truman and the Reconstruction of America's Most Famous Residents. Robert, thanks for joining me today.
Bob, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Robert, here is the question we got from our listener. It's from Jerry in Tennessee. He says, does the president have the power to tear down parts of the White House, or does he have to ask Congress or the National Park Service for permission? Also, what sort of history did we lose in the demolition of the East Wing?
Okay. Well, how much time do you have?
Well, how about this, Robert? For the listeners who maybe aren't aware with what's going on, what is going on right now with the East Wing?
Well, quite a bit. The Trump administration demolished the East Wing starting on October 20th of last year. And the plans are to erect a ballroom in its place that will seat around 900, maybe 1,000 people for formal events. And the ballroom that's planned is going to be 90,000 square feet, which will double the size of the White House's 55,000 square feet if it gets built. It's a very...
Wait a minute. What do you mean if it gets built?
Well, I mean, it seems like a done deal, although it isn't really done until it's done, right? There are not as many regulatory hurdles to get over as people assume that there are. But there is a suit in federal court right now filed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And the judge just said, I believe this week, he had made some critical comments about the ballroom. But my feeling is that ultimately the president will not really face any serious obstacles to doing what he wishes to do. And a good part of that is the assumption that I think a lot of people have that there must be a matrix of federal laws and regulations that protect the White House is erroneous. There isn't actually very much that protects the White House, which I think comes as a surprise to people. So the White House is not subject to the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. By the way, neither is the Supreme Court and the Capitol. The National Capital Planning Commission has the right to review plans according to a 1952 law. And technically, I think that is what people are waiting to see what, NCPC will do. But I can tell you right now that the 12-person board is already heavy with Trump supporters, for lack of a better way to put it. The NCPC does have oversight on construction. Here's the loophole that President Trump used. There is no oversight over demolition. So he was able to bring a bulldozer, I think it was a backhoe actually, to the East Wing and knock it down pretty much at a whim. There was nothing to stop him from doing that. It is a separate question about what he will be permitted to put up there. But, now that the thing has been demolished, it's highly unlikely that they'll just plant a flower garden there. So I expect something will go up. And I do expect that there'll be a lot of noise made about it, but I do believe that the president will probably prevail. The National Capital Planning Commission has expressed a good deal of loyalty to the president.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.
Your routine should be anything but vanilla, but your ready-to-go wellness can be. Refresh your summer routine with Vital Proteins Collagen Sparkling Water. Now in seasonal flavors like Ice Pop. Each can delivers collagen to help support healthy hair, skin, and nails in a crisp, refreshing format, so your inner harmony works with your outer wellness. Vital Proteins. Stay vital. Visit vitalproteins.com to get started. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Maintenance fee, overdraft fee, minimum balance fee, maximum balance fee. Banking fees are just a part of modern life. Or are they? They're not at Ally Bank. At Ally Bank, there are no tricks, no hidden fine print or jumping through hoops for better rates. They just want to help you save automatically while you spend, with spending accounts and savings tools with great rates. No tricks, no hidden fees, banking built for life today. Learn more at ally.com. Ally Bank. Member FDIC.
I like things my way. My coffee, my schedule, and my treatment. So I talked to my doctor about self-injecting with the Vyvgart Hytrulo pre-filled syringe, which contains efgartigimod alpha and hyaluronidase QVFC. It's injected under your skin, subcutaneously. It means I can inject in my space, on my time. It's my treatment, my way. Visit VyvgartMyWay.com. That's VYVGART myway.com. And talk to your doctor about Vyvgart Hytrulo. Brought to you by argenx.
T-Mobile is reinventing business internet with super broadband. Whether you run a small office or a factory of 500, connection is everything. Powered by America's fastest 5G internet, plus Starlink. Super broadband from T-Mobile reaches every zip code in the U.S. Super broadband, a new era of business internet. Visit superbroadband.com to learn more.
Fastest 5G network based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence Data 2H 2025. Speeds vary due to local network characteristics and management. Satellite requires hardware installation. Clear view of the sky with 36-month commitment.
It is typical, right, to make changes when someone moves into the White House, and
yes, it is.
But so describe some typical changes that have been made.
Well, here's usually what has happened. When a president moves into the White House, they take up residence on the second floor of the White House. That's the family quarters. And for the most part, that means that they change the paint and the wallpaper and some light fixtures and paintings and what have you. Basic interior decoration. Not a lot of infrastructural changes, as in moving walls, not since Harry Truman finished his renovation. But I think the spirit of your question is, have major changes been made to the White House itself by past presidents? And the answer is yes, quite a few. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So the original White House was finished in 1800 by James Hoban, the Irish architect who was hired to do the house. And when it was reconstructed after the War of 1812, it was put back pretty much the way it was originally. But then it started to change. James Monroe added the South Portico in 1824, and then Andrew Jackson put the North Portico on in 1829.
Okay, Robert. So was there any controversy when that happened? Either of those projects?
Not that I've come across. My book dealt mostly with Harry Truman, so I haven't gone back in depth. But I don't believe that there was much of an uproar. Presidents largely took a free hand with the House. And these, by the way, these were major changes, but they were changes that were done with architectural and aesthetic harmony with the building itself. The porticos were not of outsized proportion. They were of the federal neoclassical style, and they look like they've always been there. Part of the problem or part of the controversy with Trump's plans is that the ballroom is so outsized in comparison to the footprint of the house that it basically overshadows the house. It overtakes it in some ways.
So yeah, let's talk about the footprint of the house. Talk, because it's not palatial, right?
No, it's actually.
Can you paint us a picture of the White House and how many floors and rooms and wings? Just kind of give us a kind of an image for our mind's eye.
So if you were to come into the main floor of the White House, you're on the state floor, and that has the dining room, the East Room, and the public rooms, including the Red Room and the Green Room. If you're invited to the White House for an event, that is the floor that you're going to see. There's a floor beneath that, which I do believe that I've seen because I was taken on a tour of it when I was a kid, and I think they still took you down there back then. But that is what you may see if you are a diplomat who's invited to the house. The second floor of the house is the family quarters, and few people are invited up there unless you're invited to stay in the Lincoln bedroom, of course, which, is kind of like a notorious fundraising perk. So, people have gone up there. And then there's a level above that, which used to be the attic, but it was raised by Calvin Coolidge in 1927 to create essentially a third floor. But the house is quite small, and this is the reason why the West Wing was added, because originally the White House had both residential and administrative functions stuffed into that house. And as the country grew, then as the government grew, the house was inadequate. And so Teddy Roosevelt moved the executive functions to the West Wing in 1902. And even that, of course.
Robert, to interrupt you, I'm sorry. Isn't it Teddy Roosevelt who first called it the White House?
Oh, that's a good one. I believe it was him, although I think informally people called it that prior to him.
Okay.
Because technically it's the executive mansion. I've never once heard anybody use that term to describe the house.
Yeah, I've always read the president's house.
And the president's house, yes. I've seen that as well. But it's kind of like one of those names that you kind of note academically, but don't really add to your vernacular because it's the White House. And in the FDR years, when they put off maintaining the place, they called it the off-White House. So, I feel like that's kind of like it's been known that way informally for a very, very long time.
So you mentioned the Roosevelt years and how the house was in disrepair. So let's talk about like that because there was a reason, like Truman, 1948, something happened there and he realized it was time to call a contractor. So first talk about why it fell into such disrepair during the Roosevelt years, and then what happened to Truman that made him realize it was time to try to renovate.
Well, so the way that the White House was initially designed and built by James Hoban, and again, we're going back to 1800, it was a proper country gentleman's house, you might say. And so it had adequate foundations and footings for a house of that size and scope. It was a residence. However, over time, over the course of many presidencies, especially as the American Industrial Revolution began to introduce technologies that were then incorporated into the house, and I'm talking about indoor plumbing with lead pipes, conduits for illuminating gas, and then electricity, cast iron bathtubs, an elevator. All of these improvements to living were built into a house that was never designed to accommodate the added weight of those additions.
Okay.
And so what you had was an exterior foundation that was on pretty good footings. It went down several feet. It had spread footings. It could hold a lot of weight. But the inside of the house, where you had some load-bearing brick walls and there would be loads resting on those walls, if you went down to the ground level, you would find a little bit of rubble work, and that's it. And by the way, it was built on sand or a swamp or a sandy swamp, depending
Right.
on, which version you want to credit. My point is, as the years went on and as changes were made to the house and as all these things were added to the house, it began to sink, literally sink. And because the footings were inadequate in the center of the house, it began to sink from the middle. So think of like a donut, basically, or a whirlpool. So everything in the middle was being pulled down while everything on the outside was pretty much holding on. And the house literally started to pull itself apart. And it's not like residents of the house were unaware that the house was in bad shape. There was, there was this oft-told story about the White House ghosts. I don't know if you've ever heard this.
Oh, but please, but tell us.
So presidents would joke about the White House ghosts, and what they were talking about was the fact that the house would make noise on its own. You would hear cracking and snapping and other strange sounds coming from rooms that nobody was in. And curtains would billow on their own as though some spirit force were moving them. What that was the house slowly falling apart. And the dancing curtains were drafts. So even Truman liked the ghosts idea. What happened with Truman is the house fell apart to the point where it was on his watch, where the house essentially reached the point of no return. And
what wasn't there an incident where he was taking a bath?
There were several incidents. There was not the way that I found in my research, I don't think it was any one thing that caused him to say, okay, that's it, enough. It was an accumulation of very frightening events. And one of them, and I open the book with this, the Daughters of the American Revolution were in the Blue Room downstairs being received by Bess Truman. And she looked up and she saw the chandelier swinging on its own. And it wasn't swinging in the breeze. It was just swinging.
And it wasn't the ghost.
It wasn't the ghost either. Well, we don't know, but I don't think it was. And so she sent somebody upstairs to find out what was going on. And what was going on was Truman was taking a bath because there was a bathroom directly above the Blue Room where the Daughters of the American Revolution were. And Truman was splashing around. And of course, the bathtub was resting on beams that were coming apart. And another reason why the house needed to be rebuilt was not just that it was merely collapsing, but all of those improvements that I mentioned before, like conduits, right, or ducts for heating. When the workmen came to install those things, they were under great pressure to do the job quickly. So they would pull up the floor and they would carve a notch in the beam, install the channel, close it back up, and leave. So imagine that process unfolding over decades. Eventually, a beam that's 1 foot thick suddenly is in the aggregate maybe only 2 inches thick or 3 inches thick. So the house was also losing its ability to bear weight because its actual structural integrity was being compromised by these improvements. And that was why when Truman was splashing around in his bathtub, the beam was bouncing up and down, and the chandelier, which was screwed into the beam from below, was bouncing up and down as well. There were other scary incidents, like the Margaret Truman's piano leg punched through the floor at one point. There was another, if you've ever seen the 3 chandeliers in the East Room, which are enormous tent and bowl chandeliers. There was a classical music recital being held in the East Room, and the chandelier over the piano began to swing. And Truman looked at it and realized that he had a very difficult decision to make. He could clear the room and ruin the evening, or take his chances and possibly kill some of his guests. And he decided to roll the dice, and it came out okay for him. But ultimately, it was so obvious that there was nothing else that could be done. They had to move, and the house had to be rebuilt. There was no way to fix it.
The White House is literally falling apart on Harry Truman's watch. He realizes something has to be done. They move out of the White House. Where do they move?
They moved to Blair House, which
Okay.
is now the official guest residence for the White House. And it was an even tighter squeeze over there, but Bess Truman liked it really, really well because there was no room for company, and she didn't like company.
I recently was talking to someone doing another interview, and they mentioned that Truman wanted to do repairs in the White House. Congress didn't want to pay for them.
Yes. Well,
Or Congress wanted to build a whole new house.
Some members of Congress did. Yes. There were many proposals and ideas over what to do at that time. And I think it's important to point out that our notions of historic preservation either didn't exist then or were in their infancy then. And so they faced several options. And one of them was indeed, yes, demolishing the house completely. Clarence Cannon was the representative who was actually in favor of that. He was a budget hawk and he felt that it would be cheaper just to build a new house. There was a proposal to somehow stabilize the White House and leave it as a kind of museum and move the president's residence to the suburbs. And then there was an option to repair the house in a way that would still permit the president to live there and functions to be held there safely. And ultimately, they went with that. I think if it were to be done today, they probably would not have taken measures as brutal as what they did back then, because today, if you step inside the White House, as soon as you're in the front door, everything that you're seeing and standing on dates to about 1950 and afterward. So I remember reading some comments that Hillary Clinton had made, taking a guest on the second floor. She said, it's so inspiring to walk where Abraham Lincoln once walked, but Lincoln never walked there because those are reinforced, steel reinforced concrete floors.
So talk about how they did that, like how they, because you're trying to preserve a historical structure, but it just makes sense that over time things decay.
Sure.
And building techniques change and
Yes.
and building materials change. So talk about how they kind of kept the facade, I guess you would say, of the original White House,
exactly.
but updated it.
Well, ultimately, they decided that preservation, in air quotes, meant saving the facade, the shell of the house, the stone and the exterior finishing, but everything on the inside was going to be gutted and removed. So they kind of did, essentially what they built was two different structures. They deepened the foundations to hold up the outside of the house. They dug down an extra floor and a half or so, and put that on very, very solid footings. And then they built a steel frame on the inside of the house and poured cement over the steel. So you basically have, it isn't technically steel reinforced concrete. It's steel and concrete, but it's a steel framework building with poured concrete floors. And that rises from inside those historic walls. And then when they were done with that, they basically tied the two structures together. And so the interior matrix of steel was tied to the external walls, the original stone, and made it into a single integral structure.
So essentially they gutted it.
Oh, that's not even essentially. They literally gutted it. Yes. There's pictures in my book. There's pictures on the internet, of course, of a gentleman driving a bulldozer around inside the house because there was nothing left inside.
Okay, so what were people saying at the time? Like, I'm just thinking about, you talked about the decay it was in while the Roosevelts lived there for decades, right?
Yeah.
Right? It was during World War II. And so
Yeah,
we're not going to pay to renovate, the White House during a time of like a national sacrifice, right?
yeah. I mean, in fairness to Roosevelt, who I grew up very close to Hyde Park, and I've always admired FDR greatly. And in fairness to him, the maintenance for the house was deferred, yes, largely because of World War II, but it started prior to then too, because it was also a function of the Great Depression.
Right.
And Roosevelt wanted to express a certain kind of frugality in the president's family. And he understood that politically it was not the right time to be doing showy things. He was very sensitive to that. He was a very astute political animal, as we know.
Yeah. So I can't help but think like when the image of Truman, taking a bath and the bath almost falling through the ceiling. I'm thinking about Winston Churchill when he stayed at the White House, and he took many baths, right? He was famous for
He was very fond of baths.
he was
Yes.
very fond of his baths, and when he was at the White House as well as probably just always. But that could have happened to him.
Easily. The funny thing is, when Truman was told that he almost came down through the floor in the bathtub, he thought that was very funny. And he said, wouldn't it be great if the band were playing Hail to the Chief as I came through the floor in the tub? So, and I agree with him. That would have been a spectacular moment. But yes, I mean, I guess you could say that, in the pre-war years, almost anybody who stayed in the White House was taking his or her life into their hands. But anyway, the reconstruction of the house, I'll try to make this digestible. They removed all of the interior finishings of the house. And I mean the carved wood paneling, right? And the moldings, and they took the plaster out, and they weren't going to put the plaster back, but they were going to take molds of the plaster and replace it. The window sashes, the doors, the parquet flooring, all of that stuff was going to be restored and returned to the house. That was the plan. And the White House architect, gentleman by the name of Lorenzo Winslow, had made extensive plans to have this done. The problem was that, getting back to a comment you made earlier, Congress did not budget a great deal of money for this project. Certainly not enough. And there are many figures, so I can't spit them out off the top of my head, but they underfunded it, shockingly enough. And it turned out that they didn't really have the money to do that interior finish work, because that comes at the very end, and they had already spent most of the budget on the structural stuff. And the other problem, ironically, was Harry Truman himself. So he was a force for the house's preservation, at least as far as the exterior walls went. But because he viewed that as his project, he wanted that work to be done in time to let him spend. His plan was to spend the last year of his presidency in the House. He didn't get a full year, but he got close to it. And so there was a great deal of pressure that was applied to the workmen, to the renovation committee, to just keep things moving. And it turns out that renovating parquet floors actually takes a long time, to take every one of those little strips of wood and plane it down and refinish it and put it back where it belonged in the first place. And ultimately what they did was they opted for new materials that approximated the old ones. So you had a bit of an issue of even the things inside the house that look historic aren't, unless you want to say that 1950 is historic. And we were at the point now where we can say that.
Right.
I would even argue that even something that in the house that dates to the last administration has some historic merit simply because it was there for that administration, right?
Of course.
But the original materials, and I should even qualify that, because when I say original, we're really talking about material that Teddy Roosevelt had put in when he did his extensive renovation of the mansion. They're just, by Truman's time, there was very, very little of the house inside that really dated back to the early 1800s. And so it all becomes this question of what is preservation, what is worth preserving, what is history. These are still very slippery questions, but the thrust of it is they didn't have the money and they didn't have the time And so they reproduced pieces, interior finishes that looked very nice, but it hadn't originally come from the house. And all those materials that were taken out, well, they wound up in one of three places. Some of them were chopped up and sold as souvenirs to the public. I have some of them here in the apartment. Some of them were redistributed to federal properties, like prisons, for example. Like some White House doors have gone to various federal properties. And a lot of it was simply buried. It was dumped. And so it's hard to imagine something like that happening today. But in 1950, attitudes being what they were, American post-war optimism coming to the fore, there wasn't as much of an appreciation for the past in a country that had just won a world war and was looking forward to a great optimistic suburban future. So Truman's notion of historical preservation is much at variance with what we would think today. But in his day, I do give him credit for at least protecting the exterior walls of the house, because that was not guaranteed.
There have been other renovations over the years, right? The White House press briefing room, press offices, a bowling alley. Was there a swimming pool at one point?
Yeah, swimming pool for FDR it's gone now because it was in the East Terrace, which is the thin neck portion of the East Wing. That's gone. And I think what's interesting here is the weight of tradition is something that presidents have felt to varying degrees, and it has restrained them, at least to some degree, from making super dramatic changes to the House, because I think there's an appreciation of precedents and an awareness that they're only temporary residents of that House. That, the people came there, presidents before and after, and that continuity is important. The idea that our current president doesn't seem to either know that or care about it is, I think, part of what has a lot of people upset.
What's up, fam? I'm sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together and iHeart Women's Sports.
Because let's be real, women's sports is giving us way too much to talk about these days.
The highlights, the rivalries, the breakout stars, the moments that take over your entire timeline.
And the conversations that start during the game and somehow keep going all week.
Every week, we're breaking down the biggest stories across women's sports.
We'll give you our takes, our debates, and probably a few disagreements.
We'll talk to athletes, celebrate big moments, and get into what's happening on and off the field, court, track, and beyond.
Because we're not just interested in what happened, we're interested in why everyone's talking about it. Because everyone watches women's sports. So if you're already a fan,
or you're just getting into the game, there's a seat for you right here.
Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Hoda Kotb, host of the podcast Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb. Okay, if you know me, you know this. I'm always searching for inspiration, for support, and useful tools to help maximize joy. So this podcast lets us uncover all of that together. We're going to have these meaningful conversations with the world's most fascinating people, like when actress Olivia Munn shared how she overcame fierce health challenges that she never saw coming.
I've gone through breast cancer and then helped my mother through breast cancer, and that was more difficult. There's a lot of people who understand postpartum depression. I was not prepared for postpartum anxiety.
Olympic champ Shawn Johnson revealed why she had no choice but to be a gymnast.
There was something about gymnastics that was intoxicating to me. It's given me a belief that we all have one of those treasures inside of us. We just have to find it.
Listen to Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke and Yerin, Samira y Gracie. I'm so excited.
On the bouncy bed.
You have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to Suite 305, where the group chat comes to life. What up? Es como que una forma de decir como, hola amiga, hola mejor amiga, hola hermana. What up?
Mira, nunca lo había hablado con nadie. Excepto con mis hijos. Mis hijos sí saben. Yes.
Sé mi amante.
Uf. Uf, qué increíble. Ya, la telenovela.
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow starburst.
It's lemonade. No hay alguien que te falta, como que tú dices, me gustaría colaborar con esta persona. This is Suite 305. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons as part of My Cultura podcast network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with the one, the only, and the one, Michael Bublé.
You guys, I'm genuinely a huge fan. Like, it's funny, you know, I made a whole thing about doing this TikTok where I got you guys to sign the guitar, but right. It was real. Like, we listen to you in the car all the time. Like, it literally is hanging up with all your signatures.
Wow. I am so honored. After Kevin's recent, let's call it interesting confession about Michael, I had a feeling this wasn't going to be going away. We figured there was only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they're like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal. Like, what a man got to do? What a man got to do?
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Do you have a hockey rink in your house?
I do.
Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thinking about the way that Truman had the White House gutted, and necessarily so, right? It had to happen that way.
It had to happen.
It had to happen that way. So now when someone says President Trump is making, so either people are outraged by what President Trump has done,
yeah,
or someone says, hey, well, President Trump is just making renovations like Truman did. Like, so what do you say to each of those charges?
Well, I would agree that Truman took a very heavy hand with the House and that he could have been more sensitive to historic preservation. But I would also argue that what he did was essential to keep the White House from collapsing on and killing the first family and their guests. The East Wing, never had that problem. And it was not in danger of collapse. And I don't have the quote in front of me, but I believe that the president or a statement from the White House has referred to the East Wing as a historically insignificant structure. I don't happen to agree with that. And I believe that they were also a little selective with their dates because I think the announcement dated the East Wing to 1942. Well, the second story was added in 1942, but the beginnings of the East Wing go back to 1902. But this is hair splitting. There was nothing wrong with the East Wing. It did not have to be replaced. And sure, there's an argument to be made that there has to be more room in the House for certain functions. Okay. And I even appreciate President Trump's argument that if an event has been too large, they've had to set up a tent on the South Lawn and guests get their feet in the mud. And yes, that's a problem. The East Room is actually not very big. But Truman's renovations had to happen or they would have lost the entire house. The East Wing action that's being taken now is not structurally necessary. And I also think that it's largely at variance with both the tradition of maintaining the property, and it's also wildly out of proportion to the mass and scale of the house.
So we've established that when Truman gutted the White House, the Congress or the American people paid for that, right?
Yes.
Congress. Yes. President Trump says that his renovation is going to come from is coming from private donors.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that is a really, there's nothing, well, it remains to be seen if this holds water legally, but Trump at least understands that going to Congress for funding for something this controversial is probably a non-starter. And he doesn't seem to have had a lot of problems coming up with depending on the figure you believe, 300 million or 400 million required to build what he wants to build. That is actually not a new trick because Truman played a trick similar to that. Not quite with private funding, but when Truman wanted to add the balcony to the South Portico, he knew that he would not get support in Congress, either politically or financially, to do that. And he actually found some, this is not his quote, but extra money in the appropriations for the House. And he, broke the piggy bank and moved some numbers around and was able to pay for it with money that had already been given to the House. And so, you could say that he violated the spirit in which that funding was granted, but, he wasn't breaking the law, and he found an alternate way to fund it. And I think you could argue that President Trump has done something analogous to that. He has realized that Congress is not going to be a help with this one. And so he's gone to the private sector.
I am convinced that although, in my opinion, President Trump has done a lot of outrageous things, that even when he does his personalization of everything makes us skeptical of everything he does, makes some of us skeptical of everything he does or attempts to do because of his bombast, because of the way he lies so often. Even, he could have probably proposed a ballroom and went through more traditional channels and got something pretty close to what he's going to get.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Legally, and with less freaking out from a lot of people. So it's like he does this time and again where the aim or the goal, and I'm not talking about everything, but I'm talking about often or sometimes the aim and the goal is really not ridiculous on some things. But because of the way he personalizes everything and because of his attitude and his behavior, his personal behavior, it repels people from even listening to anything he wants to do. So
I think that's fair because he has, he's expressed a range of emotions from impatience to disgust with the various groups of preservationists in Washington that would like to have seen these plans, that would like to have been consulted. He's been very public about, basically pulling an end run around them. The thing, to your point, the thing that, and I'm not speaking just from my own perspective here, I do have a lot of beefs with this project. And one of them relates to something that you just said. It feels a little like a bait and switch to me. And by that, I mean, the ballroom is being packaged as an idea that will benefit the White House for generations to come. And there's no doubt that increased floor space is going to benefit the White House for generations to come. But I don't think that that's why he's proposing that it be done. I think that he's building a monument to his own presidency.
Yeah, that and 900 people at, I don't know, $5,000 a head or $10,000 a head or $20,000 a head or $1 million a head will go into his pocket or the pockets of somebody that he's in business with, most likely.
Yeah, you remember going back to the first Trump administration, there's always been this kind of, controversy, murmuring about various conflicts of interest. His business interests overlapping with his executive duties. And, going to the private sector isn't necessarily a bad idea, but there is something that feels a little oily about it in this case because there is procedure and there is protocol. And he has not really wanted to go that route. And there's another thing here that I think is really important, because if you look at the renderings of the ballroom, I'm sure you've seen models of them from the architects. The original architectural firm has been replaced, but the design is, I think, pretty much the same. Yes, it does harmonize with the design of the house in terms of its neoclassical elements. It's columns and capitals and entablatures and all the rest. But it is so wildly out of proportion with the house itself that it's this kind of classical gigantism that's going on. And the bombast, I think that was the term that you used, and I think is quite apt. It's sort of like this sort of muscle flexing. It's like totalitarian classicism that I feel when I look at these plans. And the interior, now that I'm really going to get myself in trouble, the interior looks like something that you'd see at the Bellagio and not the White House. And so, to each his own, but even though it's kind of harmonizing to some degree with the aesthetics of the house, I think it's also so out of proportion to them as to disagree with the aesthetics of the house.
Robert, you need a gigantic structure if you want to put a UFC ring inside. Okay, so if the next president comes into office, if a next president comes along, and wants to demolish the ballroom and rebuild the East Wing, is that possible?
I mean, sure. Because if you look at the various groups that have historically weighed in on changes to the house or weighed in on the design of the house or what's sitting in the house, right? This is a long tradition to a great degree that started with Jackie Kennedy. But there's the White House Historical Association, which Jackie created in 1961, the Commission on Fine Arts, the Committee for Preservation of the White House. These are groups that they don't really have a great deal of legal bite, but it is the courtly traditional thing to do to consult the people in these groups to say, what do you think? And I think that, to your point, if our current president had followed that protocol and perhaps proposed a ballroom that was just not quite as airplane hangar-like as what he's proposing, I think he would have won more popular support for it. I don't think that his argument is unreasonable that the East Room is too small for a lot of events. It is. Just like the West Wing is too small for a lot of administrative functions. But as I'm sure you know, they moved a lot of those over to the Eisenhower office building across the street, right? So they didn't say, you know what, the West Wing needs to be a 15-story building so we can fit all the people that we need. There was an understanding that the massing of the complex itself, the high center house and the two wings protruding from either side, is important to retain. And there's many ways to solve the problem that the president purports to be solving. And this is a proverbial, using a hammer to swat a fly or, have whatever, pick your cliche. But that's why I said I feel like that there is a core to his argument that I think is credible and would win popular support. But what he's proposing and the way that he's gone about doing it, I believe, is very polarizing and very alienating. And I can't help but think that he also derives a degree of enjoyment from doing things that way.
Well said. I've been talking to Robert Clara, author of the book, The Hidden White House, Harry Truman and the Reconstruction of America's Most Famous Residents. Robert, thank you for joining us today on American History Hotline.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtaw and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Base. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential and it's also elusive. But now there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on the Disgraceland podcast, I explore the wild lives of rock stars and unbelievable true crime stories from music history. These are the stories you haven't heard, the kind you'll end up telling someone else. Like the time Paul McCartney spent in a notorious prison, or the bizarre crime Lady Gaga is accused of, or that time Blondie's Debbie Harry escaped Ted Bundy. Listen to Disgraceland on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.